the reason why there was such a concerted effort to get me fired is because from the very, very top, from J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, there had been an order, right, in order to produce a narrative of a violent left in the United States to pursue, to harass, and to dox and to get fired anybody that said anything negative about Charlie Kirk. So The Guardian, for example, estimates that over 600 people were fired as a result of making social media comments about Charlie Kirk, right?
To the Other Armenians podcast. I am your co-host, Milena Abrahamian.
And I am your other co-host, Tamar Shirinian.
So before we go any further, as always, please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, engage with us, help us with the algorithm. Just let us know what you think. So today, we're actually talking again, the two of us, because this is coming at a moment when Tamar feels like it's possible to be a bit more public about the situation that she's been dealing with over the past more than a year, actually.
A year, almost a year.
Almost a year, great. So maybe some of you know, but maybe you don't know, Tamar was an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville until September 2025, so a year. And she was put on administrative leave and then fired in February 2026 because of a comment that she made, which went viral, about, what was this guy's name again? I lost his name out of my mind. Wow.
No, it's great. It's great. You don't remember his name.
It doesn't even matter his name. No, but it's important to mention it.
His name was Charlie Kirk.
Great, Charlie Kirk. So Tamar made a comment on a friend's Facebook post, which was basically used, which went viral and was used to basically put her on leave and then fire her in February 2026. And then Tamar filed a lawsuit against the university in October last year. And that has been an ongoing situation over the last year, as we mentioned. And now Tamar is ready to talk about what's been going on, and we think it's really important for this to be kind of made public because it's just been going on in the background. And it's really important to kind of look at what's happening with freedom of speech, and like just kind of look at it and analyze it from a bigger perspective than just what's happening to Tamar, because this has been happening across the board in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in the past few years, around, I don't know, student movements, protesting against what's happening in Gaza and Palestine, and just other kind of cases of, people just basically being targeted for their ideas and opinions. So the idea today is to talk about this, and based on Tamar's experience, to also have a little bit of an analysis of why this is happening now and what it means for us all, actually. So, I mean, maybe you could present a bit more the situation, but my curiosity, ever since this has happened, has really been because I know this person whose, Facebook sort of status that you commented on, and I would have never thought like that it would have such a react, or like it would become such a big deal just making this comment. So I'm curious, like, how that happens and why that happened and why did it happen? Why now? And I'm saying now in term like looking at time like over the past year or two.
Yeah, so a little bit of background on what's been happening to me, and it's been happening since like almost the whole time that we've been recording this podcast. In my life, this thing has been happening, and a lot of you, a lot of our audience knows about this already, and I really appreciate so many of you have written to me, and have written to the university in support of me, have signed petitions in favor of me, and some of you have donated to the GoFundMe that was set up in order for me to get a start on covering some of the legal costs that it took to take this up against the university. So thank you all for that. But for those of you who don't know, in September, on September 15th to be exact, last year, right after, it was like 20 days after I submitted my tenure dossier at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and I was, very much planning on becoming a tenured professor and associate professor by now. And that took a huge amount of work. It was a lot of work to get to that point to be able to submit for tenure. I was fired. Initially, I was placed on administrative leave on September 15th. And the letter that placed me on administrative leave also said that the chancellor was pushing for expedited termination against me. And all of this because a comment that I made on a friend's Facebook post, and this friend is a mutual friend of Milena and I's, went viral. It was screenshotted by some person. I don't know who that person is, and the person whose friend that was, the person who owned this Facebook page on which I had commented, doesn't know who that person is. And I've done some interviews lately, and I've like called on whoever this person is, come forward, let me know it was you, right? Like you made me a very public figure, and you're like in the shadows, so come out of the shadows, let us know who you are. I'd love to have a conversation with you about what you tried to do to me, right? You tried to ruin my life, and I assure you, you did not succeed in ruining my life. I am fine. But in any case, I had commented on a friend's Facebook post about how she had been deleting friends who were mourning Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was a podcaster. He was an extreme far right wing podcaster with extreme hateful views. His entire platform was based on going to universities and getting students to become extreme right wingers like he was, and getting them to vote red. A lot of people have argued that many college age students in the last election, in the 2024 election, ended up voting for Trump in the United States, and this was largely due to Charlie Kirk's organization Turning Point USA and the ideological indoctrination work that they were doing on US campuses. So he would go to campuses, he would do these like debates, and which is like super embarrassing, right? You have like a 31-year-old man having debates with like 18-year-olds. I mean, it's, most of us would be ashamed of doing such a stupid thing. Yet he built his entire career around that. He humiliated some of these students. He said horrible things to them. When he came to my campus last spring, before he was killed, he told one young woman who came up on the stage to ask him a question and said that she was a mother and a student at UT, and he told her that she was selfish because as a mother she should drop out and be a mother. And it, like, unbelievably horrible things that this person did and said in his lifetime. Anyway, I posted something like the world is better off without him in it. And I called him a disgusting psychopath. I called his wife, Erica Kirk, a sick fuck. At the time that I called her a sick fuck, I had no idea what a sick fuck she actually was. The only basis on which I called her a sick fuck was that she actually had married Charlie Kirk, who was a horrible person. And in my mind, only a sick fuck could marry someone so horrible. But it turns out that she was actually like even worse than what I thought. And many of us have found out about what a terrible person she is since then. A white supremacist, a total misogynist. She tells women to get married and have children and stay home while she herself is like a millionaire parading around as the CEO of this company, and digging it into the ground and ruining it, funnily enough. Um, anyway, so this screenshot of my comment on our friend's post was sent to a very again extreme right wing fascist uh, public kind of political agitator in the state of Tennessee. He lives in Nashville, which is another city near here, and he posted it to his tweet his X feed, calling on all of his followers, and he had many followers, to pressure the university to terminate me, and the university just did. Like, because some fascist was like, fire her, and got other people, like US congressmen, US senators, and state representatives from my state to pressure the university. I mean, some of the most blatant violations of public trust you could ever imagine, where state representatives were writing letters on official state letterhead to the university demanding my termination, which is like illegal in on so many levels. Um, and so within 24 hours of the university finding out about this comment that I made, they started pursuing termination against me. They didn't fire me until February, 6 months later. I don't know why they chose that time to fire me. I know why they didn't fire me until then is because they knew that what they were doing was illegal, and that they wanted to keep some kind of cushion for themselves so that they wouldn't get in much trouble. Maybe wanted to minimize the damages that they would end up having to pay me if I won in court. So they kept me on payroll until February, when, for some reason I don't understand, they finally did at that point fire me. By October, however, we had already filed a lawsuit. And in that lawsuit, we had named the chancellor of the university, the president of the university system, and the faculty senate president at the time, all of whom were directly implicated in the making the decision around my termination. Although in the discovery, in the deposition, we would find out that the faculty senate president actually had no decision-making power. He was notified that they were going to fire me. He wasn't consulted in any actual way. They had made the decision without him and then had notified him of it. So we decided later on to drop him from the lawsuit, and we had amended that lawsuit, and we were going to add many other people to it after we went through discovery and found that it wasn't just three people. It was a lot of people who were involved in making the decision to fire me, including some guy who was a donor to the university, who wrote the administration an email threatening to withhold a $10 million donation if they didn't fire me. So we ended up naming him in the amended lawsuit, naming Tim Burchett, who's a US congressman from my state, and some other people, the president of the board of trustees, and all of this. And I think once the court approved of that lawsuit going forward, which would mean discovery, and it would expand the lawsuit, it would make it much more complicated and harder for the university to manage, they decided, probably because they knew ultimately they were going to lose anyway. The board voted on June 30th to settle it for $1.9 million. And we were done, and here we are. Just a couple of days ago, we dropped the lawsuit to the federal government. So there's no more lawsuit. It's all done, and I am now talking about it more. It's been a really, really difficult year for me. Many of you already know this. I've communicated with some of you privately about how this has been affecting me. But the largeness of that settlement shows that the university understands that what they did was horrible and illegal. And so here we are.
So before I ask you any further questions, I do want to say congratulations on this win. I think that at least it sort of gives me a little bit of hope that, I mean, it's a bit, it's hope, but it's also I'm also thinking, I'm like, yeah, but like if someone's giving them 10 million, maybe they're like, yeah, it's fine if like a million and something goes to, this, as long as we are able to oppress people and, take away their kind of legal rights to speak freely as they want, so that we can push that agenda basically. So I'm curious, but yeah, so I want to say congratulations first, and at the same time I'm curious, like, why. So you mentioned, for example, there's this, like, I'm thinking about resources, I'm thinking about money, actually, because it does matter if someone's like gonna give you a 10 million dollar check and they're like, yeah, I'm not gonna give it to you unless you fire this person. Like, what is the interest of that person in firing a single person in a university system? Like, why is it so important? Is it just like, okay, I just don't like you, I just don't like you, I just don't want progressive, I don't know, like, people who are, doing things differently? Is it as simple as that, as like, okay, we just want more conservative, more, I don't know, just, yeah, just we want to press people basically? Is it as simple as that, or is it something else?
No, that's a good question. I think that um so okay, like over the last year, like in the first maybe like 4 or 5 months, I really thought that I was going to be reinstated. Um, so when the chancellor sent me a letter where she told me I was going to be expeditedly terminated, and then made up an entire process that doesn't actually exist in university policy to ensure that she actually can fire me, because she couldn't because it's a violation of the US Constitution, but she also couldn't because um, the faculty handbook lays out processes for termination, none of which would fit what I had done, right? Because nowhere in there is like, if you post a social media comment that we don't like, we're gonna fire you, and here's how we're gonna, like, there's nothing, like, you can't just fire somebody for that, right? So they call it misconduct, but then the actual expedited termination category that they used against me, which they completely changed and made up as they went along, um, was for like things like damaging or threatening to damage university property, or threatening harm or harming other people, or committing a crime including a felony, right? So expedited termination was reserved for those things. And of course, like, posting a comment on social media is none of those things. I didn't threaten to harm anybody. I didn't harm anybody. I, didn't damage any property, although the chancellor later claimed that I damaged the university's reputation. She probably doesn't really understand that reputation is not property, right? That's not what the handbook meant when they said damaging property, but they were just making things up as they went along. Um, but I have, like, often thought about, like, why are they so, like, hell-bent on making sure that I don't come back? Like, why do they, like, so much want to fire me, right? Not just that donor of the $10 million, but like state senators and state representatives and like congressmen. Like, why are they so, like, wanting me gone? And I think it has a lot to do with Charlie Kirk's murder and what the right wing in the United States wanted to make of it. Now, some of you, like, might be aware of all kinds of conspiracy theories involving Charlie Kirk's murder. There's been a lot that has been talked about, and the main purveyor of some of these theories is the podcaster Candace Owens, who like has been talking for the last year, like weaving this conspiracy theory about how Charlie Kirk was murdered, and it involved, like, France, it involved Israel, and it was like Egyptian planes and like all kinds of things, and it's really actually hard to follow what her real theory, like, I mean, maybe some of you have followed it, I don't know. I can't really make sense of what she actually thinks happened. And she at some point has said, I don't know, but I know, right? Which means that she doesn't know what happened, but she has a feeling that helps her feel like she knows or whatever. Anyway, putting conspiracy theories aside, which some of which are not that far-fetched, right? But I'm not advocating for any of these theories. If we take what happened, right? Charlie Kirk was murdered on a Utah uh, university campus during one of his events, and the person who is now in custody and is actually now under trial for his murder is this young white man who seemed to be in a relationship with another man who may or may not be trans. It's not clear if this person is a trans woman or a trans man. In the deposition testimony that this person has given, they don't at all seem to represent themselves as a trans woman. So I don't know if the whole idea that Charlie Kirk's murderer was involved with a trans woman is also part of the weaving of this whole kind of grand plot. But they tried to the right wing tried to do two things with this murder. First, they tried to pin it on the left. They tried to claim that leftists were violent, and that the left had murdered Charlie Kirk. There's no indication that that's what happened. The guy who they now have in custody, the suspect in his murder, it comes from a very conservative family. He was the owner of a rifle. So clearly he was not against, gun rights, and there doesn't seem to be any indication that this guy is a leftist at all. So as that was kind of falling on its face, because it would have been wonderful, right? It would have been wonderful for the right wing if a leftist had killed Charlie Kirk. Then he could have just like automatically become a martyr. But that wasn't working out so well. Some of the facts in the case were not mapping out onto that theory so well. And so they had to create this other way in which to use Charlie Kirk's murder in order to make the left look bad. And that way was to take anything critical that anybody said about Charlie Kirk as a celebration of murder, and to thus claim that the left was violent. And this is something that has been more successful than claiming that Charlie Kirk was murdered by the left, because now for months we've been hearing about how the left is violent because look how they celebrated Charlie Kirk's murder. None of that makes sense. As far as I'm aware, all of the people who were doxed and harassed and often terminated, none of it was celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder. None of it was celebrating violence or death or, whatever. It was basically just saying, I'm not sad, or that, basically I'm not sad. And that's how I see my comment as well, right? It wasn't in any way celebration of a murder on a college campus. I worked on a college campus. I have been working on college campuses for 20 years now. There's no way in hell that I would ever celebrate a shooting on a college campus. That is horrifying to me. Almost every day that I went to work, I did think, at least for a millisecond, about how that day I could be shot on campus, because shootings on college campuses as well as schools happen so often in the United States that it's definitely something that faculty and teachers as well as students think about all the time when they step foot on US college campuses, right? So the idea that I would celebrate a murder on a gun death on a US campus is absurd. I don't see my comment at all as celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. I just see it as me saying, we're fine, right? The world is not a sadder place because Charlie Kirk is dead. And that's just a fact. It's not. It's not a sadder place because Charlie Kirk is dead. The world will go on. There's not much that the world has lost as a result of his death. In fact, there's this popular joke that circulates all the time of like, man, it's almost been a year since Charlie Kirk said something racist. Right? So, the fact that a lot of people made jokes about his murder, the fact that a lot of people were criticizing him at the moment of his death has a lot to do with the kinds of things that he espoused and the kinds of things that he said during his lifetime, right? So, the reason why there was such a concerted effort to get me fired is because from the very, very top, from J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, there had been an order, right, in order to produce a narrative of a violent left in the United States to pursue, to harass, and to dox, and to get fired anybody that said anything negative about Charlie Kirk. So The Guardian, for example, estimates that over 600 people were fired as a result of making social media comments about Charlie Kirk, right?
So, how do you see the connection with? Because it's not happening in a vacuum. These things are not happening in a vacuum. It's happening at a time where you have ICE targeting people all over the United States. It's happening at a time when, university students are being targeted for their activism, um, you know, in solidarity with Palestinians and Palestine and Gaza. So, yeah, I'm just curious, like, what are the connections that can be made here with the context in which this is happening? And actually, I'm curious whether or not you think that it has been successful, this attempt to try to sort of frame the left as violent, as, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there does seem to be an overlap in terms of the terminations of people who made critical comments about Charlie Kirk and pro Palestine speech and activity. So, a lot of the people who were critical of Charlie Kirk were also pro Palestine and had posted or made statements earlier about Palestine, about the genocide in Gaza, about like anti-Israel stuff. So there does seem to be an overlap there, and I think that overlap is just natural because of the fact that Charlie Kirk was a far right extremist who was very obviously aligned with Israel. And the so when I made my comment, for example, like a comment that was, ineloquent, it wasn't like the greatest thing that I've ever written. I put zero thought into it. Like it's not like I was sitting there for hours wondering how to express like my real opinion. Like I was angry at the moment and I had like, it flowed out of me and I posted it. Um and the reason for that was because I had been seeing, again, I'd seen it before, but this video where Charlie Kirk is on this, fascist show, the Alex Stein show, and he's like making some stupid joke. And then at some point he goes, I used to say that if you're gay, if you go to Gaza, they're going to throw you off the tallest buildings. But wait, they don't have tall buildings anymore. Ha ha ha. Wait, too soon? Then just shut up, you stupid Muslims. Um, and like it's jarring. Like it's absolutely jarring, right? So here is this video circulating of this guy having said that just like a month or 2 months before he's murdered. And so when you're on social media, you're seeing this over and over again, and then you're also seeing like children's bodies strewn about in Gaza. And you're seeing images of children starving in Gaza, you're seeing death count numbers and like the horrific things that are being done to Palestinian bodies. And then on top of like that, you're seeing all of these people in the United States mourning Charlie Kirk's death, grieving for him and his family. Oh, and it's so sad and whatever. I can't imagine any other human response. I really can't imagine any other human response to that set of events on a social media feed than absolute disgust, right? That's the only human way of reacting to that mess, right? You have some guy mocking children who have been killed under rubble of these buildings that have collapsed on them, thinking that it's somehow a proper thing to make a homophobic joke about. And then you have all of these people grieving him, right? Like, and not grieving the children whose bodies are still in many cases under that rubble. So that horror for me, right, caused like an outburst. It was like a cathartic of like, no, I don't care how many people out there are claiming that we should mourn him. I refuse to mourn him. This is not a mournable person to me, right? So these things are definitely connected. The right wing is the right wing. It's a global right wing, right? There are divisions. There are divisions in the right, and I mean now in the U.S. Much of our audience is in the United States, and so you know you're probably all aware of the fact that there's like a fissures happening in the right wing, where much of the right wing is still very much pro-Israel, but some of the right wing is actually starting to become very anti-Israel. But because they're right wing, they're also anti-Semitic. So it's like this, you know, clusterfuck of like chaos where it's not like they're like, oh, wait, this is a problematic state because blah. They're just like, oh, the Jews, right? And then of course that part of the right wing, that anti-Semitic and also anti-Israel part of the right wing, gets collapsed on the anti-Zionist left wing, as if leftist rhetoric against Israel is the same as the anti-Semitic rhetoric of the right wing, which of course it's not. And Charlie Kirk was definitely pro-Israel. There are also other theories, conspiracy theories, some claims, I don't know what to make of them, that toward the end of his life, he was starting to become critical of Israel. And it's true that right before he was killed, he did make a comment on his podcast that he's been scared to say critical things about what Israel is doing. And some of the things that Israel has been doing is really awful. He did say that. But it does not excuse the fact that at that point, a genocide had been ongoing for 2 years and he was rooting for it. He was rooting for it and he was mocking the victims of that genocide.
I'm really still on the level of like, what do you. So I'm just going to ask you a question around sort of how you see this. I don't know what to call it, like a trend, a pattern of, you know, you just said also like 600 people, around 600 people were fired, you know, around the same topic and with the same issue. So I'm just wondering, like, what you foresee happening, you know, I don't know, like a year, two down the line. Is this something that's just gonna, like, you know, just all of a sudden stop if, you know, with another government coming in, or is it something that you foresee continuing, getting worse? I don't know. Like, what do you think is going to happen now?
So there's two important parts to that question, which I think is a really important one about, you know, where we go from here. And both of them are not good, like not positive, you know, answers. And it's not that this is an ongoing struggle. This is going to be a long struggle. And the reason for that, and I'm speaking from the context of the United States, but similar things can be said about Canada, similar things can be said about Europe, is that in the United States, right, we saw this kind of anti-academic freedom, anti-free speech, ramp up, there has actually like really never been free speech in the United States, right? Like there has always been, the FBI and COINTELPRO have been investigating activities of leftists, of radicals, like for, for decades. That like it's not all of a sudden like we used to be a free country and now we're not. Like never has this been a free country, also because it's been founded on like genocide and slavery and all of that, like that, all of that. But the important thing to remember is that the crackdown on academic freedom and the fact that like students were being arrested on college campuses, they were being defamed, they were being suspended, not just like suspended, expelled, their entire future careers ruined. Many students were being blacklisted in the careers of their choice. And all of this was happening under Biden, a democratic regime, right? So-called democratic regime. So this did not stop. This didn't start with like Trump coming back into power. And this is not just the so-called right wing. This is also liberal fascism. We have to get over the fact that there's like the two-party system is a fascist system, right? Like both parties are pro-fascist, one more in your face about it and the other with a kind of smile and telling you no we're not and whatever and so on. So we have to remember that. The other thing that I'll say is at all of these universities, including mine, where faculty have been terminated, where faculty have been suspended, investigated, where students have been suspended, expelled, and all of these things have happened as a violation of academic freedom as well as freedom of speech, all of this has been happening under liberal administration, right? The chancellor at my university who fired me and who defamed me and who claimed that I was endorsing violence and murder is most likely a member of the Democratic Party, right? There's public records. She's donated to the Democratic Party campaigns for a number of years. She had on her campus, she endorsed and supported a bunch of kind of like liberal so-called anti-racist initiatives to read books and to come together and talk about like how we can become anti-racist together and all of this kind of stuff. Fluff, but liberal fluff, right? Democratic Party liberal fluff. And so there doesn't seem to be any indication to me that the chancellor is somehow a huge fan of Charlie Kirk, right? But this shows us that liberal administrations across the country, across the board, will always fall in line when the fascists, the in-your-face fascists, come and give them orders, right? And this goes back to your earlier question about, the $10 million and what that means to the university. The university is always going to prioritize those who give the funds and who generally support the operations of the university, right? Now, we could say like, well, they had no, choice but to fire me because if they lost that $10 million or, if they lost state funds because the state legislature also wanted me fired and wrote on official letterhead, fire her or else, that the university might be in financial trouble, right, if they don't fire me, right? But the fact, however, is that they don't actually have to follow these orders. First of all, because it's illegal to threaten to withhold funds for violation of free speech, right? And second, because if we didn't have such bloated administration where we have like a chancellor and like 30, vice chancellors and like, 10 provosts and, deans of all kinds of, like if we just operated as an institution where there were professors and there were students, we wouldn't need all of the funds, right, that universities today require. Like that's another, problem. So funding is an issue, yes, but the fact that liberal institutions continuously take their orders from the right wing is also something that liberal institutions need to consider because they are participating in the destruction of higher education in the United States as well as across the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It doesn't give much hope though. I would have
We
liked
have to
to.
fight. We have to
Yeah, I would.
fight, and we will
Yeah,
fight. I fought. I refused to let them do to me what they wanted to do to me and have me go away quietly. And if something like this is happening to you, or if you're afraid of something like this happening to you at your institution or your place of work or wherever it may be, then you need to know that it's your responsibility to fight. It is all of our responsibility all over the world to fight for these rights. And you know, the US has the deepest kind of free speech laws in the world, right? In other so-called free countries, you know, free speech rights don't take you very far. The US actually does legally have free speech. But if we are to actually make those laws work, we have to fight to keep them. We have to fight when they try to strip us of those rights.
I guess that's a bit more hopeful. I'm with you on fighting for, yeah, for as a method to kind of push back against this trend. But yeah, thank you for sharing your, you know, what you've been going through, and also this analysis that you have around this issue. And yeah, once again, congratulations. And yeah, hopefully, yeah, there will be more people kind of struggling against this trend globally, because it sadly feels like, you know, it's going to continue. Um, but yeah, there's hope in the struggle for sure. So thank you for that.
Thank
And
you
thank you for
for,
listening, everyone.
yes.
And as always,
Comment, like, subscribe, follow, rate, do all of the things no matter where you're listening to us on. And until next time,
take
see you
care,
soon.
everyone. Bye bye.